Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'm going to go over what must surely be the most important detail in the election polling. It's not being covered by the mainstream media. It's not even been discussed that much by many experts, and that is because the reporting on the polls is all about what do they mean about the direction of the election, which is great, but what I want to do is more than just observe the election. I want to help influence the outcome for the better if I can. And there's something in the polls which is featured consistently in all of the polls, which can really help get the best outcome if enough people know about it. Now, this isn't necessarily new to you if you've been following my coverage so far. I even discussed it at the stream at the weekend. But there's a new MRP poll out just yesterday, and the exact same pattern is contained within this brand new poll. Here's the thing. What is the best outcome from this election? No, not just a Labour government. That was it a few years ago. We've moved on. We're getting a new government. It will have a large enough majority to pass all of its promises. None of this supermajority rubbish. Labour are already nailed on for the seats they need to hold the power needed to implement their manifesto in full. But that doesn't quite seem enough at this moment. There's an extra prize on offer. There's a real chance to beat the Tories into third place. There are 9 days to make it happen, and the only thing stopping it is people's perceptions of what the polls say, because as far as people are concerned, what the polls say is what the newspapers tell them. And what do the newspapers tell them? They just go, oh, they're going to win this many seats. Because let's look at this latest MRP poll, which is the only type of poll, remember, which is designed to predict seats won. In our first past the post system, like voting intention polls run through a rough and ready simulator, doesn't actually work. MRP polls are the best way to see seat breakdown. Yes, they have their issues, but they are the only method which have been proven to be accurate in the past. So if you happened across the focal data MRP yesterday, you will have seen the headline results that Labour are likely to win 450 seats, the Conservatives 110, the Lib Dems 50. All sounds roughly in line with other MRP polls, and in fact it's almost exactly in line with the Ipsos poll from last week. Now, for the purpose of this video, I want to focus in on the Conservative and Lib Dem seats, because that's the game now. Yes, Labour cannot afford to be complacent. Lots of people pointing out, actually, if a lot of voters were complacent and didn't turn up, only postal ballots have been sent out so far. In theory, if voters get complacent and stayed in, we actually could end up with another Tory government. That's the country finished. But that would be a mad outcome at this stage. So my focus is not so much who forms the government. The party of my choice is going to do that. It's who will ask the questions, who holds them to account in Parliament, who gets to sit on every political panel show on television for the next 5 years, who leads the opposition. It will either be the Conservatives or the Lib Dems. That is it. It's one of those parties that will be asking the questions, no one else. But if you're just looking at the headline results, you see this latest MRP, it says the Conservatives are on 110 seats, the Lib Dems are on 50, we go, the Conservatives are getting twice as many seats. Even if we manage to flip a few, Phil, that's not actually going to close that gap, is it? There's 9 days to go. You're never going to see a big enough change in voter attitude to turn that around. Wrong, because not all seats are being won by the same margin. The margin is so important. There's a detail in the polls that is just not being reported on. Most of the seats, and I mean the vast majority of the seats that these MRP polls are given to the Tories, and I have to say it's very consistent across all of the pollsters in their MRPs, is being given to them by a really small margin, tiny margins in fact. So this MRP gives the Tories 110 seats, but most of them are marginal results. So if I look at the results and I go, okay, well, never mind the ones where they're going to win by like 0.1%. Let's look at the ones where they're going to win by more than 1%. All of a sudden it goes down to 94 seats. But even 1% is negligible. Apart from anything else, these mathematical models have got a 5% error baked into them no matter how good your assumptions are. So let's look at margins over 5% then. Let's go beyond the margin of error. Well, now they're on just 60 seats that they can be reasonably confident of. But the polls, including the voting intention polls this time, have been showing something else. The Tories have actually been getting worse as the general election campaign has rumbled on. As a result of Farage joining the fray, the D-Day fiasco, potentially the betting scandal running out of control, Tory candidates calling their own party a shower of shit, Sunak arguing with voters, and just more people deciding to vote tactically. The polling situation has actually gotten worse for the Tories than it was when they called the election. Week by week, getting worse. So there's every chance it could be worse still than these polls are showing on polling day next Thursday, July the 5th. July the 4th, sorry. July the 5th is the results. So let's say any margin within 10% when you consider more tactical voting movement possible and the natural errors within the MRP polls. Let's say that any seat within 10% margin is not actually safe for the Tories. So if I say that they need a margin of over 10% to be safe, then this latest MRP poll puts them on only 21 seats. That's a hell of a drop from 110 seats. But that shows you just how marginal most of the seats that they are looking like winning are. Doesn't take much of a push to flip almost 100 seats. But what is even more remarkable is what happens when you apply the same filter to the Lib Dems. Now, with just a little bit of a nudge, nearly 100 seats currently being given to the Tories could be flipped the other way. Some of them would be lost to the Lib Dems, therefore boosting their own tally. Most of them would be to Labour, of course, the odd one to other parties. And the way to accomplish this is for anyone who is willing to vote tactically to go out, make sure they go out, don't get complacent, banish the Tories even from leading the opposition by backing the right candidate, the best one placed to stop them. StopTheTories.vote, of course, is the only tactical voting site with a proven track record, because a lot of the ones coming out now, it's like, oh yeah, we just started doing this. No, they're the ones with the proven track record. And it's also the only one which seems to be set up purely to cost Tory seats. It never ever tells you to back one progressive candidate over another where the Tories are not going to win. It's literally the only detail in the polls right now which can make a difference. There's so many details in the polls. It's absolutely fascinating. I'm loving listening to all the experts talking about what they've spotted in it. It's fascinating, but it's observation. This detail is the only one that says to us, oh, there's a thing we can do to make a difference. You know, there are great analysts spotting loads of interesting details in the results, and they're always worth looking at. And if you follow me on Twitter, I retweet a lot of them. But they are observations. They let us know, for example, that most of the Labour to Lib Dem switches are where the Lib Dems are strongest. Most of the Lib Dem to Labour switches are where Labour is strongest. So that means we know that there's a lot of people voting tactically. We can see where the key battlegrounds are for the smaller parties. We can't see clearly what's going on where prominent independent candidates are standing, because polls are not very good at that. And MRP polls certainly aren't. There's also inconsistencies over a small number of individual constituencies, because different assumptions produce different results on the micro scale. But the big picture is clear and consistently told across all of these polls. They'd have to all be getting it wrong for this big picture to be untrue. But the only thing in the polls which is of any practical use in terms of can we use this to influence the outcome of the election at this point is the fact there are loads of seats that the Tories are currently likely to win by a tiny margin. The probability is they finish in second place. Right now, that is the probability. But just a really small boost in tactical voting in those roughly 90 vulnerable Tory seats, and it's technically 89 according to this poll, and the entire house of cards comes tumbling down. The Lib Dems would be in second place. There's actually a possibility the Tories could even end up in fourth place behind the SNP because there's a lot of uncertainty in Scotland. You know, so in terms of the useful messaging I'd like to get out, based on the polling, it is this. All of the MRP results, and I mean every single, there's only been so many, but every single one, including this latest one, are all saying the same thing. The Tories are on course to finish second, but it does not take very much to dump them into third or even fourth place. That's how tight it is. And if they are dumped into third place, the entire shape of the next parliament changes, the entire course of history. Seriously, it's that big. It won't be the Conservatives clutching their pearls and asking whatever is to become of the poor billionaires and hedge fund managers. It will be the Lib Dems asking about, okay, what about net zero, relationships with the EU, water quality, boosting food security, how we're going to improve our democracy and make people more included in our politics. We get both a government and an opposition that believes in society for the first time, like in my life. Maybe ever. The difference between having an opposition on the side of the billionaire polluters and one on the side of people in the country. Can we explain to people just how close we are to getting it? In fact, just a little final point I'm going to point out. So good pollsters, of course, explain their methodology. Focal Data have written basically a whole blog explaining their methodology. And in their analysis, they have said that they have deliberately suppressed the features of the model which have tried to result in low numbers of Conservative seats being won. And the reason they've done that is because they've looked at it and thought, we don't really believe that based on normal voting behaviour, the Conservatives will get beaten down to this few seats. So they've applied. It's not a bad assumption, by the way. I'm not criticising it because, it is a bit mad. The default position is that the Conservatives finish second. But the point is they have applied a manual lever. They've actually looked at their results and gone, right, we need to apply a manual lever here, which they do sometimes, because we're not quite believing the results. The point is, even with this manual lever being applied to their model, it still shows very little extra push needed to actually wipe the Tories out. And if we didn't apply that manual lever, it'd be looking like we're pretty much there. The too long didn't read to this is tactical voting is happening. We can see it in the detail of the polls. We can see by where votes have been lost from Labour to the Lib Dems and Lib Dems to Labour. We can see that is the result of tactical voting because we know that movement is towards the candidate that's best placed to beat the Tories. It's almost at the level needed to remove the Conservatives, not just from power, from relevance for at least 5 years. Are people going to take advantage of that? We are on the verge of a genuinely historic moment here. It's not inevitable. Right now, it's not even likely. It's like, to throw a cheeky number out there, we could say it's about 48% likely that we could get rid of the Tories here. The Tories are aiming to finish second by hiding the fact they are actually incredibly vulnerable in almost all of their seats. This is why Tory candidates in seats that, in theory should be winnable have been told to abandon their campaigns and go and help out people like Jeremy Hunt, cabinet ministers who are struggling on their massive majorities. It's because they're actually very, very vulnerable. If you had a Tory MP in this last parliament, they are there for the taking. If the voting goes the right way. And we're not talking about needing a massive glut of people to suddenly switch now. There's already almost enough. It really doesn't take much to do it in almost all of those seats. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching. And until next time, I'll see you later.